Spoštovani udeleženci naše mednarodne konference, dear participants of our 5th International Conference, welcome. On previous conferences, we discussed the following topics: from minimal standards to excellence. The consequence was that we adjusted our accreditation and evaluation procedures, and we are still doing according to findings of this conference. The second one was guidelines of distance evaluations. We presented these findings to SIENCA members, a network of 40 agencies, and our study was the basis for guidelines for this big group of Eastern and Central European agencies. The third one was on hybrid approach in tertiary education. Of course, this thematics was very important in COVID times, but it still is. So the document is still very important and we're still working on it. Last year, we were talking about micro-credentials. Very important thematics. The conclusions that we had in our conference were then used for drafting a new law on higher education, which is in final stages, where we put that that we do evaluation of the system of micro-credentials, which is kind of a test to maybe one day see in next years do the same thing with new study programs. So findings of the conferences were published in our yearly publications in Slovenian and in English. This year it will be as well. They're incorporated in our work. Some had, as I mentioned, international impact. Participants of our conferences are our foreign experts, domestic experts, representatives of higher education institutions, council and appeal committee members, stakeholders. I would especially like to thank our ministry that it provided us for the data which our colleagues will show today. So everybody, welcome to the conference. The theme of this year's conference is career paths of graduates. And it's in the core of the purpose of higher education. The way I see it, the purpose is to empower students with skills that would make them contribute to the society and, of course, have them a good job. We are proud to have a group of esteemed speakers who will share with us very interesting topics. The first speaker will be Dr. Golo Henseke, who will talk on unequal graduate labor market outcomes. His presentation highlights rising inequality in graduate labor market outcomes due to higher education expansion. He discusses over-reduction, where many graduates work follow their qualification level, a trend worsening across Europe. The presentation underscores the need to address socioeconomic barriers and qualification mismatches impacting graduate career successes. The second speaker will be my co-worker, Andrej Krček, who will also moderate the conference. He will present analysis of data of unemployment among graduates of Slovenian higher education institutions. His presentation analyzes unemployment data for graduates from Slovenian higher education institutions. Findings reveal that Slovenian graduates generally have lower unemployment rates than the national and EU averages, with regional and study cycle and field variations. Graduates from Eastern region and certain fields face higher unemployment, while most study programs show stable unemployment trends. David Metz will speak about employment data in the governance of Danish higher education. His presentation provides an overview of how employment data is actually used in the governance and accreditation of Danish higher education. Employment rates influence funding, students' intake, and program relevance. Higher education institutions must use employment data in quality assurance, guiding audit selection and strategic goals. The next speaker, Dr. Tomasz Dejelan, will discuss project Eurograduate use of data in internal quality assurance system. I'm sure diverse findings he will present will be of great interest to the audience. Our last speaker, Dr. Tjasa Bartel, will share a broader look on informed choices using administrative data to compare graduate labor market outcomes by field of study. Her presentation emphasizes the importance of using accurate labor market data to guide students in making informed education choices. Mismatched choices lead to costs, of course, for individuals and society, while clear information on job outcomes can improve welfare and reduce socioeconomic gaps. Her study shows salary as the main factor in choosing a study program. I wish everybody that you will find the conference useful. Andrei, please take over.
Big thanks to the director, Franci Demšar, for his opening address and, of course, professional guidance and organizational support in the preparation of this conference. So thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our online conference on quality in higher education, graduate career paths. My name is Andrej Krček, and I will be your host today. We are very fortunate to have participants from higher education institutions, the ministry responsible for higher education, SQA experts, and our quality assurance colleagues from Slovenia and Europe. A few important notes before we proceed. This session, as you know, is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel later on. So you can revisit the discussion or share them with others. Please submit your questions using the QA Zoom feature during the presentations. While we may not get to every question due to time constraints, we'll do our best to address as many as possible. Today's speakers will provide valuable insight on how graduate labor market data is and can be effectively utilized in quality assurance processes at all levels. I'm confident you will find the discussion both engaging and sometimes thought-provoking. Now let's begin, finally. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Golo Henseke. Dr. Henseke is Associate Professor at University College of London, UCL, with extensive expertise in labor economics, education, and higher education. He has led various internationally recognized research projects, including the CGHE Project 4 on graduate labor market and equity. His work has informed UK government policies and academic metrics for evaluating graduates' employment outcomes. Today, he will present on unequal graduate labor markets outcomes. Golo, the floor, or better, the screen is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the organizers, for putting this very interesting conference together, and I'm looking forward as well to the other presentations. So I'm going to, as already mentioned, I'm going to talk more broadly about unequal graduate labor market outcomes, particularly in terms of mass expansion of higher education. This is something that I've been looking at over the last few years through various in various initiatives and projects. And what I want to give you today is a little bird's eye views, a bird's eye view on what has happened in terms of enrollment and the size of higher education systems, and how we can think about unequal outcomes, in particular through the lens of qualification mismatch, and with that particularly, I mean, graduates working in non-graduate jobs. With the massification of higher education and tertiary education systems more generally, and with that I mean the growing participation in those systems, it's not just more graduates, it's also an increasing diversity among graduates who achieve various different labor market outcomes. This is partly influenced by their personal factors, including skills and background. It's also influenced by program characteristics, but also by the broader economic supply and demand that comes along with it, and how this has changed together with the mass expansion of higher education. And together with colleagues, particularly Professor Francis Green, have argued that qualification mismatch, or over-education as sometimes is called as well, or education underemployment, is a critical dimension of inequality among graduates, with a number of advantages in thinking about when we think about graduate labor market outcomes. Over-education itself is associated with penalties in pay, skills use, and job satisfaction. So those graduates that work in non-graduate jobs will usually see lower pay, they will report lower levels of skills use, and tend to report lower levels of job satisfaction as well. So these are not necessarily happy choices if we see graduates working in jobs where their qualification isn't required. So let me give you a brief overview of what has happened to tertiary education over the last 20 or so years across the EU. If you're looking just at Eurostat and the LFS data available from there, see this has been a huge surge, a huge change in the percentage of young people with complete tertiary education. It's gone up more than 20 percentage points over a 20-year period. It's a massive transformation of in the distribution of educational attainment in this age group. And this, of course, means that the workforces are changing as well completely. We've now got workforces that are much more educated than they used to be. And this trend, as you can, I try to draw a trend line, has not reached its limit yet. Growth is just as strong as it used to be. So this is going to continue towards universal tertiary education, basically. If we look across systems, so this is now trying to look at as many countries as I can, I find that out of 152 countries, 103 have reached the threshold of mass or universal systems. It's in 15 out of 152 countries are classified, you can classify as universal tertiary education systems. So these are systems where more than 50% of young people would achieve a tertiary level qualification. The top attainers in this group are Singapore, South Korea, so maybe no surprises there, Canada, Cyprus, and then Ukraine, and below there a number of other Eastern European countries, actually. This mass expansion doesn't mean equal opportunities. Expansion leads to an increased stratification within tertiary education system in almost all systems that we have data on. There are various mechanisms at play that can that allow us to explain those changes. For example, elite institutions holding onto a higher ground, cultural capital differences might make it easier for students who come from more academic backgrounds to thrive in those academic environments, and cultural and social barriers alongside those. The results are persistent inequalities in experience and outcomes among graduates and higher education students more generally. Increased access does not necessarily eliminate those disparities. The stratification itself reflects and reproduces social inequalities that are wider than the higher education systems and exist outside of it as well, and then continue to exist and be reproduced through it. And what I want to argue basically is that we can use graduate over-education as one indicator of to measure the stratification. Graduate over-education as a concept captures not all graduates benefit equally from higher education. For example, it would allow us to look at who is overqualified, what are the disadvantages of being overqualified. For example, would we expect that those from minoritized backgrounds may find themselves more likely to be overeducated, potentially indicating a disparity in the returns on educational investment? We might want to could look more closely at the socioeconomic factors that determine whether somebody is working outside a graduate job. And we can think more broadly about the mismatch that then emerges between the demand and supply of graduates. There are three general concepts if you think about measurement of graduates over education. There's one that is based on what graduates do. So it's also called realized matches in the literature. We basically look at what jobs do, what are the jobs that graduates do, and then say graduates that are in jobs that are not typically done by graduates would be overeducated. It's easy to compute in almost all data where we have occupations, but it's sensitive to changing educational levels. So it's not a very good measure if you want to track actually what's happened to graduate overeducation over this period of mass expansion. So what alternatives do we have? We could ask graduates, do they require a degree? And that's great. It's an individual assessment, so the individual would be best placed to say, was that degree actually useful? But it's not always readily available and requires dedicated specialized data collection. And there are some concerns over subjectivity. The alternative is to classify somebody as overeducated or matched based on what experts say, based on a job analysis. The advantage here is consistency and potential objectivity, but there's a little bit of a trade-off, the risk of absence of job roles change. So jobs change a lot alongside this higher education expansions. Could expect maybe also skill requirements to change. Nonetheless, I think for especially this last one is actually fairly easy to implement in most international data sets, labor force surveys particularly. Labor force surveys and general household surveys will usually include information on individuals' occupation, so their jobs, what type of jobs they do, what kind of occupation they're in. And occupation classifications, they map into the international standard of classifications of occupations, differentiate between 4 skill levels that are clearly linking educational attainment to what type of work is required in those jobs typically. Occupations at skill level 3 and 4 in that classification are thought to require advanced education. These would be jobs of managers, professional, associate professionals, and technicians. So they would be considered high-skill graduate level occupations. We can then say that overeducated graduates are individuals with tertiary qualifications working in occupations classified below skill level 3. The advantage of this fairly simple, probably a bit coarse around the edges classification is it's fairly easy to implement. It's available in international, the ISCO occupations are widely available in international labor force survey data, and it provides a consistent framework for comparison countries, of countries and over time. We did a little bit of work on how good is this done, this dichotomy between graduates working in high-skill jobs and low-skill jobs. How does that compare to an alternative measure of graduate overeducation, particularly the self-assessed one? Using, I'm showing you here results from British data, and you might say, well, this is Britain, but it's at least one attempt at validating the indicator. According to the indicator, so according to our British data, if we distinguish by skill levels, we would have about 25%. Or if we differentiate graduates into non-graduate and graduate positions based on the occupation skill level, we would have about a quarter of graduates being underemployed. Self-assessed, that is just slightly above the the 25% mark. So we don't see significant differences in here in the percentage of over-educated using either indicator. If you look at the pay penalty, its point estimate is larger. So we see almost a 50% pay penalty for underemployed graduates compared to matched graduates using this occupation skill levels. It's a bit less using the self-assessed measure. The difference is again not statistically significant, so I wouldn't make too much of it. In both cases, we see clear pay disadvantage for graduates working outside of graduate jobs. And the last one is people's report on how much skills they use, particularly skills underutilization, so how little skills they use. We see that that's much higher for graduates working outside of graduate jobs, independently of our measure, whether it's just based on an occupation or a self-assessment. So we're pretty confident that just splitting graduates along those lines in high-skill occupations and non-high-skill occupation is actually a fairly good measure of underemployment. So using this simple dichotomy, I looked at the prevalence of graduate overeducation in Europe in 2023 using Eurostat data. First of all, one thing to note, graduate overeducation is evident in all European countries, but to different levels. It ranges from just 7% in Luxembourg, which is the only country, by the way, that is that low, to 37% in Turkey. The median is about 22%, and you can see for sort of France, it's a diverse group of countries falling into that median range. France, Lithuania, Estonia, sort of this coloring. Slovenia would be also in this sort of middle range bracket. Compared with 2013, prevalence of overeducation rose in 20 out of the 30 countries. Now thinking about what I said earlier, linking this back to the massification of tertiary education systems, is there a connection? Often we hear that with the expansion of tertiary education system, there's going to be a growing supply of graduates, and economies would struggle to absorb this growing supply of graduates. So we might expect a positive relationship between the expansion of tertiary educational attainment and the share of graduates working in non-graduate jobs. But if we look at the data across Europe, we actually do not see this pattern. Expanding graduate labor supply can combine with in some cases, increased overeducation, in other cases, very little changes in terms of overeducation. In some cases, overeducation even comes down. So there is in Europe at least, no natural, if I may say so, no natural law that determines that a growing higher education system produce more graduates that are then not ending up in graduate jobs. So this is not something we see. There's a lot of wiggle room for individual countries to form and shape what happens to graduates in the labor market. So to sum up, educational attainment is rising everywhere, but mass expansion doesn't mean equal opportunities. Graduate overeducation is, I think, a valuable approach to assess and compare the stratification of graduate outcomes internationally and local and nationally. The job occupation skill levels are readily available measures of graduate destinations. And what we saw on this last slide I showed you is that graduate overeducation is influenced by more than the supply of graduates. There's a lot of wiggle room for positive outcomes here. And what I maybe should say before I close, in fact, this measure of graduates working outside of high-skill jobs is indeed something that the English quality assurance, higher education quality assurance agency uses as one way of assessing the value of a degree. We've got a couple of publications in case you are curious want to read up on some of the work Francis Green and I have done over the years on this. I'm sure this will be shared subsequently. Thank you very much.
Golo, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. So I encourage participants to raise questions to your Q&A. This is now the only time that, so after every speaker has presentation, then we have a 5-minute slot for asking questions. So now is the time to ask Golo something if you want to. But Golo, can I ask you some questions about your presentation if before somebody from participant asks you? I'm interested, can overeducation trends be reversed through policy interventions, and what might those look like? Is there need to reverse it, or?
I think, yes, there's potential for overqualification to come down. It will shift with the demand on the and how well the economy basically does. Using our indicator, the high skill graduates in high skill or non-high skill employment clearly shows the link between graduate outcomes and what happens in the economy more widely. If we have an economy that grows, particularly in high skill segment, that will be one that where opportunities for graduates will open up. But then overeducation may also come down as a result.
Exactly, because you can reverse this in each way. So if there is more jobs that the graduates, more appropriate jobs for graduates, then the results, of course, can be better, and overeducation could be lower. Did you measure maybe some, or what do you think about socioeconomics backgrounds influence?
Yeah, I haven't looked at this in this particular case. We have done it in the past, and this varies across countries, obviously. So sometimes you find family background mattering. So graduates who come from less traditional academic backgrounds do tend to find themselves more often in those positions of graduate overeducation. They sometimes see gender differences as well, like women leaving the labor force after becoming mothers, for example, and then trying to come back in. That is often a bit difficult and might be associated with overeducation. You might see people from particular subjects more likely to be overeducated if the link between the subject they studied and the occupations they are aiming to do is not as closely linked. You would have the usual suspects of more arts and humanities subjects, for example, being more likely to be overeducated in most countries I've seen.
Yeah, so we have some questions now. So one is overeducation is also very much field dependent, isn't it? It is.
It very much is. So yeah, you would. It depends on basically the level of vocational level of the degree qualification. If you're doing a medicine degree, you pretty much know what occupation you end up with, or if you do something in teaching, you kind of know this is going to be there. And in other fields, the link is just not as strong. It doesn't mean those graduates from those fields will always be overeducated. That's another important point that I haven't looked at here, is the persistency of overeducation. It doesn't just because in some fields or sometimes you start off with an overqualified, you're not necessarily bound to be overqualified for the rest of your life. But it's nonetheless important to look at this path trajectory, and sometimes it's this particular fields might have a particular transition into the world of work that includes this might not be as direct, but usually, as far as I know literature, there is some persistency. So you are more likely to be overqualified in the future if you're overqualified now. So that's why this is a little bit is not so. It's a bit of a cause of concern if graduates start off in low-paid jobs. They are unfortunately less likely to catch up to those graduates who do start off in a graduate job after finishing university?
Yeah, because we saw in your data that the self-assessment about pay is much significant different with reality. So it's probably
there's a lot of a big gap in terms of what graduates earn if they are not in graduate jobs. That depends a little bit on the inequality in like how spread out pay is in general in these economies. Like if you imagine an economy that's very unequal, where managers get a lot more than and professionals get a lot more than, let's say, someone working more in intermediate or low skilled jobs, then you will also see a big gap in the pay between matched and mismatched graduates. In more equal societies, that might not matter as much, but in those economies where there is already a significant or earnings inequality, it does tend to also really hit the bottom line, yeah, how much you earn.
Thank you. So the last question from Professor David Dawson. Is the speaker arguing against the expansion of higher education, or making the point that we need to support people from minority groups to better take advantage of it?
The latter. I wouldn't say I think what I want to highlight is, first of all, that higher education expansion is a big achievement. It's transformative for so many, but we need to be mindful that an expansion in itself doesn't equal opportunities for everyone. So thinking about how we can ensure that the economy supports this growing number of graduates is really essential to make sure that people who come to university with high ambitions and high expectations to be able to meet those high ambitions and high expectations following graduation. That's basically that's the point I'm trying to make.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answers and for your presentations. It was really interesting. Now I have to introduce the next speaker, probably the easiest introduction because I am the next speaker. I am working as a senior advisor at Slovenia Quality Assurance Agency. I'm working in Department of Analysis Informatics. Currently, or in the recent past, my work was primarily on data management and informatics. Lately, I'm focusing on research into graduate career paths and their integration into the labor market. So that will also be my presentation, just to start sharing. Do I have to change still? Okay. So this presentation, I will talk about analysis of data on unemployment among graduates of Slovenian higher education institutions. Purpose and objectives of the presented research is to identify and analyze the state of graduates' unemployment in Slovenia, to explore the main characteristics of unemployed graduates, to highlight and interpret the main findings, and to develop future guidelines and approaches for integrating this data into quality assurance processes. So this is just we will be focused on first two of these proposals, so to identify and analyze the state of graduate unemployment and to explore the main characteristics. The research that we are conducting on the SQA is, of course, much more deeper. For today's presentation is just, it's at the beginning of this process and the beginning of the research. So we will not go so in depth that Golo before did, or some other presenters will do later. we will focus on, I will just try to make a picture for you how it looks in Slovenia. About about data and methods, as the director said, we are thankful to the Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Innovation that we got data under a data processing agreement. The ministry have really precise data to individual graduate via unique identifiers. In Slovenia, it's called EMSHA. So they know for every individual if when the individual graduated or what was his or her employment status. We got 2 sets of data for higher education institutions and for study programs, and they have the same variables. Number of graduates by institution and study program from 2012-2019, enrollment figures in the first year, and the unemployment figures 6, 9, 12, and 24 months after graduation. We will focus on year 2019 and what is happening with graduates 12 months after the graduation. The majority of charts are, I will point out, are with these variables. We also have to watch about GDPR. So every number, every variable that is equal or lower than 5 must be anonymized. But just in case, because it's the first time and we want to talk about these results with stakeholders, we anonymized every single name of university, faculty or study program in this presentation. So there will be no names because it's the first time and we want to be sure, of course, that everything is correctly done and presented. But still, we can learn a lot of these figures and find something new in it. To start with the general data, to give you the little bit context about Slovenian higher education area and labor market. So there is 110 higher education institutions in Slovenia, 8 universities, 64 comprising 64 members, faculties or academias, 38 independent higher education institutions. There is 932 accredited study programs. Of them, 65 are short cycle, 353 first cycle, 395 second cycle, and 119 third cycle study programs. This year, we are having approximately 58,000 students in this 24-25 study year. Which of them, 12,000 of them are first-time enrollments in the first year of the first cycle. The labor market is big, almost 1 million employed individuals in Slovenia, and with approximately 40,000 higher education graduates entering or let's say potentially entering the labor market each year, which is quite significant, and it's getting bigger and bigger share in totals. To put the Slovenia tertiary education into the international context, we can see that Slovenia is doing well. The graduates unemployment rates are low, about 3% in 2019, and it's under EU average, and we can see huge difference with the best and the worst, or let's say highest unemployment rates. Slovenia is doing well in the meaning of international context. Let's see on the national level. So the first conclusion about this data is that in any year or in any situation, tertiary education population with finished tertiary education, it's having the lowest unemployment rate. So they are doing better on the labor market than the general population, active workforce. Even the difference is even more significant in the years when there was, in the years where there was, the economy was wasn't doing good, we were still in recession, the difference were even more significant. Past years when the economy was much better, the difference, there was a less difference between general population and tertiary population with tertiary education. But both following similar path, so very correlated to the general economic state of the country. Then the interesting, when we were searching about the regional differences, we noticed that there is quite significant difference between in the populations that are living in the eastern cohesion region comparison to the west cohesion region. And almost the identical results are when we talk about tertiary, in population with tertiary education. Or let's say not even tertiary, but higher education. So we can see the charts are almost the same. We can see that there are differences, quite significant differences, even when if individual finish or graduates finishing the studies at the institution with location, institutional location in East region or in Western region. And there are probably reasons. There are quite obvious reasons in the difference in the economy development of the regions, and of course in the Western region, in the center of Slovenia, there are also more jobs available with demand of higher education graduates. Then we looked into the comparison by degree level. So I am currently also a third cycle student, and I'm happy about it, of course, because the unemployment rate is the lowest. And it's, again, obvious reason why, because I'm already employed, and a lot of third cycle students are already employed as in a normal job or as young researchers or so on. The highest unemployment rates are in the group of graduates finishing second cycle, which is again expected, because after first cycle, a lot of students are continuing with their studies in the second cycle, and then after second cycle, most of them are entering the labor market, and here they are facing some challenges with their jobs. Also, there is a difference. This is more for Slovenian participants, between university studies and, let's say, higher education professional studies. In the first cycle, we can see, again, expected that the university studies have a lower unemployment rates because of most of them are continuing to second cycle with the professional degrees, higher unemployment rates. A lot of them are already entering the labor market. It's true that as Bologna you can also go to the second cycle from professional degree, but again, they are more professionally oriented. This is probably the most chaotic chart. We compared universities, unemployment on the faculty, on the institution, university level. And here we can see that we have a lot of different cases. So the first one of the university has constantly high unemployment rates through all of this measured period, and then we have also university with the lowest unemployment rates. But there is also a third case when one of the university had really high unemployment rates, and then lower it to be the lowest in the country. We look also what's happening with so this is quite unstable. You cannot make any conclusions, real conclusions on these charts, and because they are very unstable and they are changing, except maybe 2 or 3 cases. And we also looked at what's happening with the study programs, and we can see that a lot of them is also unstable. What does that mean? That means that sometimes the unemployment rates are almost 0, and the next year they have a lot of unemployment graduates. So there is not a constant, it's lacking of constant stability, but most of them are stable, or they are they are really they have high unemployment rates or low. Of course, we must know in Slovenia there are really different types of universities. So we have publics, we have private, and then really big one, and some really small ones. So that all affects on that results. Then we on faculty level, we looked into the differences between fields on Slovenian qualification, qualification called Classius, field qualification called Classius P16. And we can see that these results were quite expected, except one field. I will talk about this later. So the highest unemployment rates have the faculties that conducting programs in arts and humanities, which was quite expected, as I said, and the best are doing the programs, engineering programs in general IT, natural science, and so on. The big surprise was the health and social security field. And this is, as I said, for 2019, and what's happening with the graduates from that graduate in 2019, 12 months after graduation. So it was really interesting to see that the health and social security field was had quite big numbers, and you will see why later, because of course we have to investigate what was happening there. But first, I would like to show you that if we go to the art and humanities, we can see a huge differences between faculties that are having study programs on that field. We can see some of them are doing really bad and some of them are doing excellent. So you can say that if you are performing on that field, that you will have a low unemployment rate. It's just not true. And of course, nobody goes to faculty directly to study, but there are enrolled in the study program, and we must go to the level of study programs to see more what's happening. And similar is with the numbers within business and administration field. And I can give you example here with faculty which is doing in general quite good, so better than the average on this discipline. And we can see that some of the programs that faculty is conducting has good or almost zero unemployment rates, and some of them very high. Of course, one reason is because of these are the number of graduates of this year. So in Slovenia, this is a little bit quite the problem or challenge to make research on it, because if you have 2 graduates and easily one is unemployed, you have 50% of unemployment. So this is of course not relevant data to make any conclusions, and this is the case in those 2 programs. So they have really small numbers of graduates. In both cases, there are 2 unemployed persons, individuals, and they are getting really high, because of those 2, they are getting really high unemployment rates. But in general, faculty is doing good because the 2 programs that have a lot of graduates are doing well. So with the small numbers of unemployment graduates, so in general, they are doing well. I talked before about health and about study field of health. It is interesting because there is a really high demand for, let's say, doctors or nurses in Slovenian labor market, really high. So it was really surprising to see that after we have 2 programs in Slovenia, I will not tell you which one is this, which is 1, which is 2. So it was really interesting to see that after 12 months after graduations, in the program 1, there is, for general medicine studies, there is 30% of unemployment. And in the other case, half of that, almost 15. And after 24 months, there is almost zero unemployment. And we realized that there is some anomaly in system, because they have to, graduates of general medicine studies, they have to conduct specialization after finishing after graduating, and because they are not getting in, or and they have to wait to get in the required specialization, they are just unemployed and waiting to move on. But in this case, the things are getting better. So we conduct already some, we show some results to ministry, and they are having some, they are finding some how to manage this better, so that we don't have so much unemployed doctors 12 months after graduation. This is, of course, have nothing to do with quality of education or something. This is totally anomaly in the system that we are doing, and that's why the so big unemployment rates in this field. So here are the main findings. Graduates of Slovenia higher education have a lower unemployment rate than the general population of the country and the EU average. The rise and fall of unemployment among Slovenian graduates follows the trends in the labor market. Graduates who reside in the Eastern Cohesion region have completed their studies at a higher education institution. They are more likely to be unemployed than their counterparts from the Western region. The unemployment rate of college graduates differs considerably depending on the field of study. There are significant differences in unemployment rates for graduates of different study programs within faculties. Certain systemic anomalies have a significant impact on graduate unemployment rates. The vast majority of study programs examined show stable trends in graduate unemployment rates, which is good. So thank you for your attention. I don't know if there is any question, and if I was too long, I will check this now. What is the most? I will read the first question. What is the most vital reason of unemployment of graduates in Slovenia? Skill mismatch, economic factor, curriculum relevance, employer expectation. Interesting question. We didn't go so deep in the reasons. This presentation is purely to show you the state, but of course I have some kind of opinion. Probably economic factor, I would say the first, and then also the difference between I think this difference between region West and East is also very important, because the jobs that demands more high-skilled professionals are more located in the center of Slovenia or in the western part than in the eastern. So that's why there are also quite a big difference in unemployment. Many students get their first employment outside Slovenia. Are detecting this in your statistics? Tadej Tuma. No, we didn't cover this in our statistics, in our data, but of course it will be interested to see if there are some trends in graduates leaving Slovenia, and how big it is, or if it's stable or it's increasing, but yet we don't have this data. I think this is it. So we can move further. So we have with us David Metz. He's a senior advisor at the Danish Accreditation Institution with over 15 years of experience in higher education accreditation. He has developed thematic analysis and contributed to the design of Denmark institutional accreditation system. David also represents Denmark in the Nordic Quality Assurance Network in higher education. David, the floor is yours. Before that, maybe we were visiting Denmark, and and why we choose the Denmark to be presented here, because they have really a lot of experience of using this data in almost any level of quality assurance. So thank you, David.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to give this short talk. I was just inspired by the two previous speakers to explain a little bit about something that I'm not going to talk about now in the Danish system, and that is we also in some cases use other types of data than particularly unemployment data. For instance, we also have data on job skill level and the match between graduates' skill level and the job skill level. And there has been done a lot of analysis in Denmark using those types of data. And that is part of what is behind a big reform, which is currently being negotiated in Denmark of the whole higher education sector. But I'm only going to speak about how data on employment or rather unemployment is being used in the ministerial governance on the one hand, and on the other hand in the accreditation system, which is what I am doing in my daily work, where we do institutional accreditation by auditing an institution every 6, or very soon it will be every 8 years. So in the ministerial governance, they have a mix of using economic incentives and direct regulation. And in the accreditation system, we, on the one hand, we have a number of expectations towards institutions that they need to use data on graduates' employment in their internal quality assurance or assurance of their program's relevance. And then we also use the data directly when we choose the audit trails during the audits. That is, when we do an institutional accreditation, we look at the institution as a whole, but in order to fully understand how they work in practice with their quality assurance system, we choose a number of programs, depending on the size of the institutions, to illustrate how they work with the quality assurance. And in that choice, we are informed, among other things, by the data on employment. So the incentive governance from the ministry consists mainly of these factors. What you perhaps need to understand is that all the higher education institutions in Denmark are fully funded by the state in regards to their educational activities. Of course, they can seek funding for research from other sources, but when it comes to education, the state funds everything. So part of the funding is called activity funding, and around 4% of the total funding for educational purposes are dependent on the unemployment data for the institutions. So that means that if graduates from the institutions are unemployed to a too high level, they will lose some of their funding. And otherwise, if it's okay, they'll keep it. So that's in the basic funding model. But then besides that, every 3 years, the minister makes a strategic contract with each higher education institution. And in that contract, they will have some strategic goals. And some of the total funding for the institution will be dependent on the success of those goals after 3 years. And typically, not always, but it's in very many cases, unemployment or employment is one of the strategic goals, and the whole contract decides on approximately 1.25% of the total funding from the state to the higher education institution. So these are two types of incentivizing institutions of caring about whether or not their graduates actually get a job when they leave the institution. But governance also includes a more direct regulation. So one of the things, and this was introduced, I think it's 11 years ago, a new model for student intake adjustment. And that was exactly because of concerns about over-education, because there were some analysis were done that showed that too many were unemployed, or too many were employed in jobs below their skill level. So the model now looks back for the last 10 years of graduates, and then they measure their level of employment 9 to 21 months after graduation. So that means you don't look at just one date, whether or not a graduate is employed, but you look at over a 12-month period, to which degree has each graduate been employed for that period. And that comes out with a number, and you can compare that number for one program from one education, from one institution, to the national average for all graduates from a higher education. Currently, the national average is just below 7% when you measure all graduates in this period. So if you are 50% over that level, you will be regulated on student intake. So and up to the government can, or rather the ministry can decide for to regulate the intake down with up to 30%. And the other direct governance is that if an higher educational institution wants to provide a program at a new location, or provide a completely new program somewhere, they have to demonstrate that this new program or provision of a program is relevant. And one of the things they have to demonstrate is that this type of program or similar programs have a low level of unemployment, or otherwise the minister won't accept for the institution to provide a new or to open a new provision of a program. So what are the requirements when we do the institutional accreditation audit? Well, we have it is an expectation that the institution use employment data for their decisions on regarding the program's quality and relevance. So these types of data are, of course, the degree of employment or unemployment, but it could also include other types of data, like, and this might come from the National Bureau of Statistics. For instance, as I said previously, we also have data on the job skill level, but those data are not that reliable. So we don't, they're not used that much in practice. But then also the ministry conducts a survey among all graduates every second year. And and graduates are asked to self-assess whether or not there's a match between both skill level and job level, and also the contents of the skills, if you like, and the content of the job. Those types of data could also be used, or the institution could do their own surveys of graduates, or they could do other types of research, for instance, just looking at LinkedIn, see what kind of jobs do your graduates get. And they can use that to adjust their programs, including adjusting the contents of programs and adjusting the intake of programs, or the way that they provide the programs. And it's also an expectation that the institution maintains an ongoing dialogue with employers that are relevant for the programs that the institution provides. So typically you'll see that each institution has some sort of a council or committee, or what you might call it, a board of representatives of employers for instance, a group of program graduates, and they meet with them at least once a year to talk about whether or not the program is still relevant, to ensure that it's not only because the data on employment, of course, looks back in time. That has also been a large criticism about the model for adjustment of student intake, that it looks at historical data, but that is not necessarily a good way of deciding what is needed for the future, because the labor market changes constantly. And that is also, now that I mentioned this topic, that is also one of the reasons why the official data on job skill level are not always valid, actually, because the job contents change over time. And when employers report the job skill level to the Statistical Bureau, they don't really care so much about being precise in reporting it. So sometimes you see that people have a job with a high, where the job content actually is a high skill level, but in the register it looks as if it's a lower skill level. So yeah. And then as the last point is how do we use these data when we decide on audit trails? Well, we view data as an indicator on good quality assurance. So if you have good quality assurance, you would expect good quality. Or so it might inform us on the topic that we look at in an audit trail, and also, as I said previously, which program cases we use to illustrate the quality assurance work that an institution does. And that might be the unemployment rates. And in this case, typically we would, if we look at one program, we would compare the unemployment level of graduates from that program, from that institution, to the national average of graduates from the same types of programs. Not all, because that would be unfair, because then, of course, it would look as if, for instance, compared to the Slovenian data, that people, an institution with a lot of programs within arts and humanities, they would have a lower quality than one within the technical field of engineering. We also look at the rates of transition from education to the labor market, or from education to further education, because we have 3 or 4 levels of tertiary higher education in Denmark, level 5, 6, 7, and 8. And sometimes it happens that people, for instance, finish a level 6 degree, and they really want to get a job, but they can't find a job, so instead they take further education, and then they end up with a level 7 degree, and then they get unemployed. And you need to take that into account, that sometimes further education masks potential unemployment. And sometimes we also do a more sophisticated analysis. For instance, we also have that geographical phenomenon in Denmark, but opposite what you have in Slovenia. The further west you go in Denmark, and also the further north you go in Denmark, the higher is the level of unemployment among graduates from higher education. So what is the problem there? Is the problem that the institutions in that part of the countries are just bad at their job? No, probably it's a better explanation for this is that the parents of students in those institutions, to a lesser degree, have a higher education degree than the parents of students in other parts of the country, in the eastern part of Denmark. So social demographic variables could explain those geographical differences of employment levels in Denmark. That was it.
Thank you, David. We have one question from Professor Tuma, but I think you are some kind already answered it, but still I will ask you this question. Funding higher education based on employment on a yearly basis is basically volatile. Are not higher education institutions complaining about it? You said that it's historical data and can be also. Are they complaining, or this is something that is?
Yeah, they are complaining.
Of course.
I think they also at the same time think it could be worse. For instance, if you look to the Finnish system, I know it's a much larger portion of the total funding that is dependent on those types of data than in Denmark. And I think it's not, but I'm actually not quite sure about how often is it regulated. It's not every year. I think it's maybe every 3 years that they actually regulate the funding.
Thanks. We have another one. It's two, but I will ask you something before. So, what do you do? Let's focus. You were talking about also the ministry role and using this data ministry. Of course, this is not your job. This is job of ministry. But when you see the bad results when you make an audit in your processes, what you do with it? If some program have constantly bad results, what is the steps that you're taking?
Well, when we had, we used to have a program accreditation in Denmark. And when we did that, then we looked at it more detailed, and it could have different types of consequences. For instance, and it could mean that the institution had to shut down the program. That never happened based on employment data or relevance, but it did happen in some other cases. But now that when we have institutional accreditation, basically the institution is self-accrediting its programs. So that is not the subject of the decisions that are made about accreditation. We would, if an institution has a program where, or rather, it depends, if a respectable amount of programs with these types of problems, then it would result in hard criticism, and they probably wouldn't receive a full accreditation. And that would have the consequence that they are completely barred from opening any new provisions of programs, and also that they would be subject to program accreditation up until they at a later time would be awarded a full accreditation again.
But because we talk about it a lot, you first, of course, ask them why, and then,
yeah,
and the main thing, I think, I get the impression that the main thing is how do they deal with this data? As you said.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a better answer, actually. Thank you for
No.
helping me answer what you actually asked me about. Because, yeah, before we get to any decisions, of course, we talk to the institution about how do you view this problem? So, and how do you use these data, and what do you do? Do you consult anyone about what you have to? One thing is that data shows that graduates might have problems getting a job, but what is the explanation for this? Is it just that the companies in the surrounding area of the institution are in a current economic crisis, and that might change in a few years, or is it because as I said previously, that the institution's student intake has a profile of socio-demographic variables that might be a big explanation for this. And in this case, the institution has the choice between barring students from getting an education in order not to get criticism from us, or giving them a chance to get an education. And so this is yeah, so we look at it in a very nuanced way, I hope. So it also never happened that an institution has had such a harsh criticism regarding how it handled these data, that it has had any consequences. So it's a purely theoretical scenario.
Maybe the last question. What strategies or methodologies should be employed to ensure that program evaluations remain relevant and accurately reflect the skills and competences needed by graduates in a continually changing job market? You were also talking about it, but what's your thoughts about it?
Yeah, my thought is that the dialogue with employers is more valuable than looking at historical data. That would be a short answer. That you need to be
perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect answer. I think we understand that they should be involved employers should be involved in the quality assurance process in the institution. This is it. And
yes.
Then, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Really, thanks. Goodbye to Denmark. Now the next speaker is how to say, very known to us, and we are collaborating a lot with Professor Tomáš Deželan. He is one of our experts. Always is also we are working together in preparation of conferences, a lot of stuff on quality assurance. Tomáš is a professor at political science at the University of Ljubljana and holder of the Jean Monnet Chair. He has coordinated over 30 research projects, many with the international governmental and non-governmental organizations. His work spans political participation, employability, and education quality, and he serves as quality assurance expert for ENCA and other national agencies, including NAKVIS, as I said. Tomáš, the floor is yours. It will be interesting.
Thank you, Andrei. Thank you for kind words. I think you spent too much time with that, but I hope I will fulfill the expectations. Anyway, it's great to be here. Actually, well, it's good that you don't have an on-site event, because I'm actually sitting at the DGAC, and we've had a very productive meeting of the Eurograduate Consortium. So actually, we're also looking at the way we can improve, and I guess this is a good sign for quality assurance. So, well, my today's mission, and I know I don't have a lot of time and I like to talk a lot, so I'll try to keep an eye on time as well. Well, I have to because of the plane, not just because of the conference. I wanted to talk about, well, a bit about data that is obviously of high utility for the quality assurance processes. data that actually also the Eurograduate project produces, as well as some other initiatives, mostly I would say institutional or project related, as well as basically, like what can we actually do with it, and then what absolutely we shouldn't, because there's a lot of, I would say, also challenges in relation to the use of this data. So this is kind of my intention. So it's going to be a bit of everything, not a lot of anything. But anyway, I hope it will still kind of address the key areas that I actually was also expected to talk about. Now, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna go to slide 3 and then back to 2, just because I prepared it like at the last second while listening to the discussion, because I feel this is actually very important in this entire process to take on board. Now, I'm actually saying this because, obviously, because of my past roles as someone who is responsible for this at various levels, also as someone who's actually sitting quite often at the evaluation panels, like external evaluation, accreditation panels, and so on, and someone who actually did some work in that field as well. So first of all, I would say the key thing we should actually also kind of pursue here, also with, I guess you're doing this with this conference, is to provide data to, well, institutions as well as to other stakeholders. I agree absolutely, to the public as well as future students. But first of all, to develop good programs, right? Now, we faced quite a lot of challenges, and we still will, in relation to, well, basically data collection, as well as some other things related to analysis. But I would say, if institutions don't have data or don't have good data, then they cannot do anything, right? So first step is actually to help them. And I guess also, like Eurograduate tries to address this opportunity as well as need, and then also kind of look at various levels that can be catered in a way, and I guess institutions are a major part of it. Then what I would say is, and then it was very well said before, like there's some expertise required to assess virtually anything, and if you're coming in to, I don't know, evaluate the program, it's very good to know what you're actually evaluating. And I guess it goes for the contextual knowledge, as well as disciplinary knowledge, as well as basically knowledge of the, well, most direct local environment and what goes on there. And I think like the quality assurance processes, whether they are internal or external, are a very good instrument to do that. And I feel that frequently there are different stakeholders important in this process that actually don't trust these processes, right? And we get the best people coming to the institution, helping them, discussing about the project, the program or the institution, and actually then also providing some sort of feedback about how this is seen from this side, right? So basically, we feel this is bureaucracy rather than this is part of, or this is the major part of development. So I would say we don't trust our own experts, whereas it's the field, like disciplinary experts, because they know sometimes better than we do, even though we actually look at, I don't know, labor market figures or teaching and learning figures more often than they do. So it's actually taking this knowledge of the relevant processes of QA, as well as some other, knowledge, and in a way, trusting them. I guess we're living in a society that doesn't trust knowledge. And I think we should first address this need here, because we have this opportunity. So rather than cutting, killing, slashing the programs, teachers, universities, you name it, we should help them develop, right? With like strong incentives. I agree, like there have to be strong incentives to develop. because some people simply don't want to develop, or some institutions, but still this development-oriented approach should be there. So in a way, every stick should have its carrot as well. I think this is really important, because otherwise sometimes we're just killing internal quality assurance processes or reflection and so on if we come and we just like judge and cut or try to cut, right? So with that in mind, I was thinking of, and now I'm gonna go back, yeah. With that in mind, I was thinking of like where we are as a system, you know, like the Slovenian higher education system, and what we can do within our frameworks and within our terms of reference. Sometimes I sit in an evaluation panel, accreditation panel, and I know I could have done more, but I don't, because my terms of reference is that, you know, and we're sitting like in ENQA panels or ECAR, you know, framework. There are ECAR frameworks, ENQA frameworks. There are different frameworks, and within those frameworks, you're actually able to help or contribute to this reflection. And I guess ours is usually this one. And obviously, I'm stating here ESGs just in order to indicate that there is an ESG basis for this kind of discussion, as well as for discussions that usually the teams want to discuss and sometimes are then questioned by the institution. Yeah, but is that still within your terms of reference and so on? And for example, like the ESGs clearly state that it's not just like labor market relevance of higher education, it's actually also societal relevance. And these are some kind of parts from the ESG, and then what the purpose of higher education is, and according to which standards should we assess it. And I guess here you can clearly see that also active citizenship and then this broader impact on society matters. Now, the next one, obviously, it's the national rules, the criteria, NAKVIS criteria. I guess everyone knows quite a lot about that from the national crowd, but I'm still going to say we have this in the reaccreditation of institution part. We have this in the accreditation of study program part. So basically, there's a lot we can work with, right? And if I go back, it's not just about the way we develop programs, even though I think this should be the main idea and the main drive, and not also the informing the public. Usually we come to an institution with this idea, you should inform the public, meaning, you know, like parents of future students or future students themselves. I agree, that's a very important aspect of it. But first of all, you know, also informing the programs to properly develop themselves. And knowing Slovenian higher education institutions, usually they don't have a lot of data available to actually do something like that. And a lot of them actually do struggle, but they actually do also invest quite a lot. So this is something to think about, as well as obviously at the level of study program, it's clear that the study program has to be relevant and has to take care of that also at the level of program self-evaluation, and not just whether the actual institution is performing its duties, if I may say so. So what did we do? We took this into account when we were actually, you know, like joining the Eurograduate framework or consortium, but primarily also we thought about how we can actually serve the need of the stakeholders that usually don't get this kind of information, right? So obviously it's relevant if you have the unemployment data and so on, but as we've seen and we know, you can get this also through other things, right? But there are some aspects that are simply a bit more difficult to get. So this is what we wanted to do, get this data on a more, like I would say, wide basis in terms of scope, as well as in depth in some cases, if that actually, you know, like the situation allows. Sometimes it's very difficult to tell something about a program, you know, if a program has a cohort, annual cohort of, I don't know, 20, 15 students. Yeah, I mean, that's not then, surveys are not then the best thing. We all know about that. Okay, so this was a brief timeline of the Eurograduate initiative. I won't talk about that. Now it's getting bigger and bigger, which is great. And there are new countries coming on board in the next round as well. And what I can actually say is also there are different modules, right? So basically it's different modules that compile the final questionnaire, and obviously there are optional modules for different countries. What we did was actually have all 3 modules. Particularly the last one was actually quite relevant to us because the social value of higher education goes beyond income, right? So this is what we actually wanted to see. We knew that before. We had evidence of that before as well. We actually wrote a book about it like 10 years ago, where we clearly indicate that even without a certificate, the higher education experience contributes to a more functioning society. But anyway, you know, like this was a great opportunity to have this in a comparative from a comparative perspective. Now, I won't go into that because into methodology, there's a lot, and there were various ways of surveying the target populations. I mean, this is a big part of it. There's quite a variation of it. Some countries are actually, at least initially, stepping in very cautiously. But anyway, this is also an area which informed quite a lot. Which informed us a lot also about how to approach graduates, how to work with graduates, and how to actually also improve in that area. Now, in terms of surveyed areas, there are actually 5, you know, or like if we would look at our report, which is going to come public after the transnational one, and I learned today that the transnational one will be presented by the Commission, I think somewhere in March next year, because of the obviously new Commission coming in and so on. There are, for example, 8 areas where you could actually, you know, like split them up, well, according to your preferences. But in general, we talk about 5, and it's educational experience, it's labor market participation, it's labor market outcomes, skills match with job requirements, something which is very relevant, well, as everything is, as well as social outcomes of higher education. Now, like what there's still a Slovenian word there. Now, what's the relevance of what we did or what we're doing for, well, anyone, any stakeholder? Like what we do is actually pursue an approach that also some countries are pursuing. So basically make the data available to the ones that actually need it and want it, but at the same time create some direct utility of this data for the ones that cannot, for example, I would say afford it or cannot allocate resources for it. So basically what our aim is to have reports that have direct utility for development of programs. Obviously, with the clear knowledge that most of the times we cannot come to a program level, but we stay at the field level, right? So basically, the relevance is high. And when it comes to the results, I'm gonna basically just like throw in a couple of them because it would be very discriminatory to actually push for some and then not the others. And obviously, there are really a lot of interesting information in the database. But what was very clear, and I'm mostly going to present this transnational comparative part, because obviously this plays a part or has significance, particularly for the systemic level. But at the field level, obviously, if there is a variation, this is also very relevant. But what we clearly learned, and then this was kind of well, to me, it was a shock because I actually coordinated or also one big project with a clear intention of professional development of higher education professionals. So basically teaching and learning. And we were still this lecture style teaching and learning country, or if I may say so, we're the most lecture style teaching and learning country in the sample, so in the consortium, which is like, well, in a way, a slap over my face, you know, in relation to what we did, or just a clear indication that we should have done or we should do more in the future, right? Because we still stick to this very traditional style of teaching and learning that obviously has a significant impact, particularly also on certain skills. But anyway, so this was something that clearly, you know, resonated from the results. Now, if we go further, when we looked at the average satisfaction rates, now everyone actually does satisfaction, you know, in some or the other way, particularly institutions. They usually use satisfaction data for like courses, teachers, you name it. It's still, I would say, a very not up-to-date approach. I won't say out of date, but still it's quite traditional approach. We haven't concentrated so much on student centeredness and what actually, how, like particularly in our institutional policies and instruments, how the student is doing, but mostly we assess teachers, courses, programs, and so on. This is somewhere in between, but anyway, it actually has some meaning also for the development, and obviously across different fields, and even sometimes within institutions, you could actually see this satisfaction rate, and obviously you can also react to this. Now, then international mobility, like this is important for various strategies of internationalization from, well, basically an idea of individual at the program level, so basically a student or a teacher, or like the country itself. So obviously this has an important, well, also developmental element. We know that our system is not built very well, I would say, efficiently to promote internationalization, but still, you know, like the data indicated that we're actually not so bad. We could improve, absolutely, you know, but in that sense, we also appreciate our figures despite certain challenges that we all know we face when we implement, you know, different different measures that should promote internationalization. So, for example, international mobility here was let's say decent, you know, something we didn't expect. Then labor market participation, this was particularly informative for us, because usually when we talk about employability, they just talk about whether a person has a job or not. But that's like, what can you do with that as a professor? I guess you can actually, you know, try to improve that part in terms of like obviously labor market relevance of your courses and so on. But in general, it doesn't give you a lot, right? So basically what we always wanted, particularly at the level of institution, was to broaden the debate. So, okay, this is relevant, absolutely, but there's so much more to this debate. So this is actually something which kind of indicated the relevance of like what I'm just saying, because what now if we're actually performing well in terms of employment rate, and obviously you can go for matching and so on. I'm not going to go into that now, but still, is that job over? I mean, we're always like the core idea of improvement is constant improvement, what's not optimal and so on. And obviously we can always improve, right? So basically this perspective actually meant that sometimes if we perform well in terms of like this kind of statistics, we give a false impression that we're actually okay for now and we don't need to react to anything, you know. So in that sense, we were actually obviously happy to see and the indicators and the data, but at the same time happy to reveal the relevance of this kind of data as well as things we do, because there's broader relevance than just like having a job or keeping a job, right? Now, the next stage is obviously vertical match, and then this is actually where we add this relevance. And obviously the vertical match indicated more, right? And like vertical match is actually this issue of over education and so on. So whether you have an appropriate level of education. And here, I'm sorry, I have a very small screen because I operate on laptop, so my interpretation will be limited here as well. But so, for example, we clearly saw, obviously, an image that can be improved as well, because obviously, particularly, we were worried about, you know, like overeducation, because we know what overeducation means, and obviously this is something where we can work a lot, where we can actually do more, and in particular, this is also something that actually indicated, and this was the case across different variables, that obviously we have to talk about the programs as a unit of the first and second cycle. Now, Andrei talked about this quite a lot before, and then I guess chopping it to the first cycle and second cycle and looking at it as a standalone thing could be misleading. And in this case, it was clear that obviously we should do that because we know what our system looks like, and in many ways it's a bit different, or at least it's different to some of the other systems we're being compared to. So this is, I guess, the vertical match indication. The horizontal match, whether we work or whether they work in their field and so on. This is also something to explore, and obviously there are also variations here. There's also, you know, like this, tendency, or I won't say tendency to misinterpret, but there's a challenge of interpretation here, because obviously some fields are a bit different than others, and we, you know, like the general debate about disciplinarity and the types of disciplines, and whether it's applicative or basic, whether it's actually so basically whether we can actually talk about very defined occupational profiles or not. So in that sense, it's actually something that tells us quite a lot, but at the same time, you know, we need to here kind of involve the disciplinary knowledge to actually interpret these data. So this is why I said sometimes, you know, programs are in a way the best experts, because basically they are the experts of their own disciplines, and teams coming to assess or evaluate those programs, if they're composed of the same people from the same disciplines, are the best sort of environment to develop those programs, rather than us looking at the program like from this systemic point of view and so on. So this is something that actually also adds relevance, in particular in relation to certain fields, but also like the orientation of some programs as well as disciplines in general. And also this general idea about what the university is. Is it a Humboldtian institution that creates knowledge, new knowledge for the sake of knowledge that will actually gain utility, or we are creating someone for a very defined job which already exists somewhere across the street? Yeah, I mean, I won't go into that debate. I have my own opinion, but anyway, I mean, we wanted to actually push for this kind of debate as well. Now, also the graduate job satisfaction was very relevant, particularly if it's actually something which is within the match, right? If it's actually a horizontal and vertical match, so how are they actually feeling? You know, is this something they want to actually spend their life in, and so on? So this is actually something that adds a lot, and also has a lot of variation, and also kind of indicates that there are some systemic issues within certain fields that need to be addressed, and this can be not exclusively, but can be also a consequence of the labor market situation there, right? And the arrangements in that field or profession. So in that sense, I guess was also relevant. This element was also relevant where we actually look at various dimensions of the overall satisfaction. Is it like the salary? I mean, they're saying no, right? Is it something else? They're saying yes. I guess we can have a debate about this, but they are actually the experts of their own experience, and they know what makes them, happier, if you will. So I guess if nothing else, we should actually take into account also what they tell us in this sense. And for example, these are some of the items that are being measured. So in order not to go, because I probably already passed all my deadlines, now we look at different things as well, like skills mismatch, like mental health. This was a big thing. 1/5 of our graduates work in a situation or at least experience mental health issues that can be attributed to various things. We didn't go into that, but that's something we should keep an eye on. Then social trust, democratic dispositions, and so on. So basically, my general conclusions, and I'll be really quick, is that like when we look at our national data, we're like moderately, our graduates are moderately satisfied with study progress. So it can be, or they can be improved in that area, absolutely. Now, dominance of teaching and learning, that's something we need to urgently, I would say, address, because we still live in the 19th century when it comes to our lectures. I don't do that, but obviously some others do. Now, high employment level, I guess this is not something to actually then make us just scrap this data and do some other things. No, I guess this makes us actually keep an eye on other relevant things that are also shaping our higher education area, as well as the fact that this is also a bit of idiosyncratic situation. For example, a lot of graduates actually have their jobs before they graduate. And this is why we also see that there's only like 24% of graduates that actually look for a job because they have it already. They have it already because the labor market is actually very, very aware of like their competences or their skills. Also because some of the work-based learning elements or modalities of some programs are very beneficial. So during job internships, the employers already learn who's good and which programs are good and so on. Now, over-education, that's a problem. That's a problem. Is it a problem of higher education or the economy? Well, let's talk about it. Visible horizontal mismatch, yeah, it is. It is, not to deny it, it is. And particularly at some field or some disciplines or in some fields, this is actually something to be addressed. As well as, and with this I'll end, as I said before, noticeable share of graduates with mental health issues, which is actually also a systemic kind of impulse that something also beyond the higher education needs to be triggered to help this part as well, because I guess this actually then creates also issues relevant far beyond higher education institutions. So thanks for now.
Tomasz, thank you very much. But you're right, we are getting over our planned time. But so I have a lot of questions for you, of course, but I will do it later, probably next few weeks. We will conduct an interview and we will publish.
Yeah, we have an interview.
Also.
Yeah.
So for everybody, you will get some answers. But for now, I would like to thank you and go on.
Thanks.
Not exist, and you have a plane to catch. So
yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time, and I'm glad that that higher education institutions are also dealing with this data and thinking about it. So this is very good. Thank you. So for the last but not least, of course, Dr. Tjaša Bartol is a researcher at the Institute for Economic Research and a lecturer at the Faculty of Economics, University of Ljubljana. She specialized in labor economics, econometrics, and the economics of education. She's also a consultant for the World Bank and chair of the Statistical Council of Cooperation with Researchers at Slovenia Statistical Office. Tjaša, floor is yours. You are muted. Unmute, please. No, Tjaša, ne slišimo te, lahko se...
Yeah, I was just having some problems because every time I tried to push the button, it disappeared. So hello, everyone.
I think I got special feature.
Yeah. I think I have like 5 minutes left, so I'll try to be very fast.
No, just make a presentation. We will skip maybe the discussion if it will be too long
sure.
later on. Yeah.
So today I'm going to talk about how we can use administrative data in order to compare graduate labor market outcomes, both field of study, in order to help make students or any individual to make informed choices. This is kind of my pet project, which I managed to spark some interest among the stakeholders. Haven't obtained yet the financing for it, so it's going on slowly, let's just say that. So to begin with, let's consider why informing the public about the labor market outcomes is essential. So first, incomplete information can lead to suboptimal decision, and that's for students mean that they can achieve lower wages, lower job satisfaction, or even unemployment. Then there's an issue of labor market misalignment. So when companies can't find candidates with the right skills, it increases their recruitment and onboarding expenses. This also means higher turnover rates and ultimately lower productivity. We know that for both individuals and the state, education is a significant investment. So when people make choices that do not align with the market demand, the cost can be substantial. This can be either in terms of education funding, unemployment compensation, or lost income. When we provide accurate, relevant data on job outcomes, it empowers students to make better educational choices. And this in turn can reduce the need for state intervention and can create a more efficient and aligned workforce. So there has been a lot of research on how providing accurate information can improve welfare. It can also increase employment prospects and reduce socioeconomic gaps. So we have some studies that dealt with how information can help in job market search or in college choice. So whether persons apply to better or let's say in US into more selective colleges or not. But there are also a number of studies that look at college, not just the college, but the college major choice. So, for example, in United States, the experiment showed that when students got information on job outcomes, they were less likely to choose humanities and arts, which had lower incomes. In Chile, they found that overestimated beliefs regarding incomes were especially prevalent among low-income or lower-achieving individuals, and when receiving information, on those outcomes, they reduce demand for low-return degrees. Of course, there are also non-monetary preferences that limit the impact of information students received. Similarly, in Italy, they found that high school seniors had biased beliefs about higher education returns, and once they were given the accurate information, the enrollment to lower return fields was a bit decreased. In Germany, they also looked at the differences between male and female students and found that mostly males were affected by information on earnings by different education fields. Different factors can impact different socioeconomic group differently, different in types of information, and the impact of information will depend on what kind of information we provide, whether we will provide only monetary or some non-monetary outcomes in the labor market. The impact of information also depends on the preferences regarding study and career. So the more relevant the aspects that students are informed about, the greater the impact of information will be. Of course, if there's a larger difference between the current beliefs and reality, then the impact of information will be greater. And it also depends on how likely the individuals are to update their inaccurate beliefs, because we know that not everyone readily changes their mind even when presented with the right facts. So to gain some insights into what influences students, so individuals' study choices in Slovenia, we conducted a survey which included a small sample of roughly 230 high school and university students. And we did this with an online discrete choice experiment. This means that instead of directly asking students about the importance of different factors, we presented them with a series of choice tasks. So each participant was given one randomly selected set out of 5, and then each set contained 10 choice tasks. In each task, students had to choose between 2 hypothetical study programs. It looks something like on the small picture you have in the middle. And each of these study programs had different levels of attributes, such as expected salary, employability, academic reputation, study difficulty, and admission limits. So this allowed us to evaluate the preferences indirectly without, as I said, asking them about each factor. So how much do you feel that this factor is important when you select your study program? Our findings show that among the studied factors, so you notice, because there's just a limited amount of attributes that you can ask about, otherwise people cannot compare 2 programs based on, I don't know, 15 factors. So among those, we found that the salary was the most influential one, and it accounted for roughly 46%. And this was twice as important as employability, which came next at roughly 23%. Other factors were found to be less important. So we saw that salary and employability account together for more than half of the decision weights among the studied factors. And we know that the most accurate source for such data are administrative data sets. These data sets cover large populations over extended periods, which makes them reliable and relative without the need for additional data collection or additional data collection costs, because they are already collected for other purposes. However, of course, there are also disadvantages of administrative data. They lack the recent labor market changes. So we've already talked about this. With the administrative data sets, we see what has happened in the past years on the labor market, and they also lack qualitative details such as student or job satisfaction, which are, of course, also very important. So Slovenia has a wealth of administrative data comparable to the Danish And for example, in the field that we are interested in here, we can look at statistical register of the working population. We have data from income tax and also structural earning statistics. We have data on student, graduates, and higher education. This is something similar that Andre used probably, but this is also, from the statistical office. Then we also have job vacancy applications. Here we have some problems since 2013, but it's going to be changed again. So that will capture the whole job vacancies for the whole labor market. And of course, we also have unemployed persons registrations. And the beauty of it is that everything can be analyzed at the statistical office of Republic of Slovenia, and all these data sets can be merged together and analyzed. So for the results of the web applications that we want to present to the public, we leverage data from all graduates in specific field. So not only those who ended up in the expected jobs, which is the statistics that we usually can find in the official data. So for example, what we did is that we calculated the number of employed and self-employed. Then we also calculated average wages and incomes, the unemployment rate among all individuals with specific field of higher education. We also looked at the number of jobs started per year and the occupations and their shares among graduates of specific field and also economic fields. So far, the application looks something like this. So this is just a snapshot. It's in Slovene. It still needs a lot of work on the appearance, and we need to update the calculations. So far we have data until 2021. But the general idea is that you will be able to compare fields by the mentioned factors, or you can alternatively check specific factors such as salary for all study programs. So by choosing from the left side menu. You will also be to compare different fields of study as you're able to compare your potential new phone in any online shop. So basically what we want is to present this kind of data in as simple manner as possible. Of course, we also need to add some explanations what these figures mean. So one of the big questions that we face is how prepared this data really makes us for the future changes, especially with the rapid advancements in technology and AI. So, but there has been a recent paper published in Research in Higher Education and a bunch of other studies as well. So that they show that we can actually use administrative data to identify which fields of study are likely to benefit from or be at risk due to the AI. So what they did in this paper, they used data on occupations and education leading to these types of jobs to categorize fields of study into 4 groups in terms of the impact of AI, the 4 groups that you see on top. They basically mapped occupations based on the level of transformative and destructive effects of IE on the 4 groups, and then mapped fields of education to these occupations. And in this manner, we can use administrative data to help informing students even regarding the future trends. So for example, here, what's interesting to see is, for example, ICT, which we already seen today, had the big expansion in the last year, but was actually categorized here in the machine terrain group, which means that it has high transformative impact. High transformative and high destructive impact. So meaning that there are going to be large changes in the types of jobs that students will be able to gain from these fields of study. So our more immediate future steps include a data update of the existing data sets. We also intend to include the results from the Future of Jobs report for the 2024. Slovenia will feature in the report this year for the first time. We managed to collect enough responses from the companies in order to be included. We also plan to conduct an experiment to compare choices made by participants before and after receiving targeted information in order to see how much sense does it make to have such an application in our case. And of course, the most important step, we want to make the app working and publicly available. So this was a really short presentation. Thank you.
Jasha, thank you very much. It was very interesting, obviously. Yeah, you are right. We are using the administrative data from Ministry of Higher Education, but they are getting some kind of also with statistical from Statistical Administration Office. I would like to stress out that David written to me. They already have this application, similar application that you showed running. I saw it when I was in Denmark. You can find it online, and there yes, you can see almost every information that you said, expected salary, employment status, everything, so that and it's publicly open. Today we didn't have time to show it.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I mean, it's not such application. It's nothing new in the international kind of sense, but it's still something that we lack in Slovenia, I guess.
Yeah, it's true, but exactly this conference is the step towards to talk about it, and we have to talk about with stakeholders. Slovenia is some kind of specific because of we are some kind of small with small universities, small number of students, and yeah, it takes some time. I learned that, but I agree. The good data is probably much better than the no data, and decision made and with lack of data can be good. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks.
Thank you. So at the end, I know we are exceeding time quite substantially, but a lot of you are still with us. And in the end, I'm also pleased to welcome Dr. Boris Dular, President of SQA Council, who will join us next to provide a brief summary and deliver the closing remarks. Please.
Lep pozdrav vsem. Seveda, vsekakor ne bi predstavil kakšnim dolgim povzetkom. Predvsem bi rekel, da je bilo današnje srečanje izredno zanimivo, bogato, bi rekel, kar eni taki kompletni dimenzije, ki je za področje nacionalne agencije in sistema kakovosti zelo pomembna. Mislim, da smo predvsem dobili poudarek, že ki je bil na začetku izpostavljen strani profesora Hanskeja, torej širjenje izobrazbe, terciarne izobrazbe je velik dosežek na eni strani, na drugi strani pa na ta način, kakorkoli to izgleda absurdno, se povečuje neenakost zaradi, bi rekel, tega naraščajočega števila izobraževalnih programov in seveda potem lahko bi rekli nadzaposlenosti oziroma številnih diplomantov, ki opravljajo svojo delo pod svojo kvalifikacijsko ravno. Že on je nakazal torej potrebo potem, da se to vprašanje obravnava širše družbeno in seveda to nujnost povezovanja z gospodarstvom in seveda povezovanja med, se reče, šolsko sfero in pa trgom dela. Mislim, da je poudarek, ki ste ga vi, Andrej, izpostavili, vezan na našo nezaposlenost na trgu, zelo se mi zdi prava v tem smislu, da na eni strani, kar je razveseljujoče, da pravzaprav da ta stopnja brezposelnosti ni višja kot povprečje v Evropi, da pa je seveda zelo specifična glede, lahko rečemo, in na regije, in potem še na programe, in tudi znotraj posameznih univerz je to zelo razslojeno. Kar se mi zdi ključno, je to, da in potrebno pravzaprav za slovenski prostor je, da so ti kvalitetni podatki pridobljeni. In mislim, da ti prvi podatki, ki so, se mi zdijo pomembni za to, da bomo lahko tudi dovolj analitično globlje pogledali. Če bi kar navezal to, kar je profesor Deželan govoril, torej ključne so vsebinske analize in seveda zato je potrebno imeti res vse podatke. In on opozarja na to, da če teh podatkov ni, da je to težko oziroma da velikokrat, bi jaz celo temu rekel, zaključujemo na način, tako bi rekel, na približno in se potem tudi v praksi izkazuje, da mogoče bi morali kakšno zadevo bolj temeljito premisliti in odločiti. Z vidika predvsem področja kakovosti, o čemer je govoril gospod Mec, se mi zdi zelo zanimiva in aktualna za Slovenijo tudi za razmislek ta pristop, kako uporabljati podatke o zaposlenosti, tudi z vidika priprave programov in samega financiranja oziroma spodbujanja tistih programov, ki so bolj zaposljivi v odnosu na tiste, ki v bistvu producirajo kader, ki v bistvu je potem zaposlen na drugih področjih. Nedvomno pa, torej ta ključen podatek, ki se mi zdi, da ga je dal, je, torej, da je potrebno v presojah kakovosti te podatke o zaposlenosti oziroma brezposelnosti na tem segmentu posameznega programa adekvatno analizirati in seveda tudi ustrezno odreagirati. In seveda potem še posebej ta poudarek, ki se mi zdi, da je sicer v našem delovanju poudarjen, pa verjetno bi moralo biti še bolj, je na povezavo z delodajalci in skupnemu premisleku, kako nadgraditi programe, jih spremeniti ali pa mogoče celo priti do tega, da je kakšen tudi v kakšnem trenutku že prešel. No, zdi se mi, da še tale poudarek se mi zdi zelo pomemben, ki ga je profesor Deželan izpostavil, in sicer ta nujno potrebno spoštovanje in zaupanje do strokovnjakov. Tukaj se srečujemo z različnimi razmisleki oziroma poenostavitvami, torej nismo vsi strokovnjaki za vse in seveda ta ekipa ali pa ti strokovnjaki, ki področje obvladajo, so se pri tem dokazali, jim je treba zaupati zato, da lahko res pripravijo vse tiste presoje, ki omogočijo, da se lahko nek program kvalitetno razvije in seveda tudi nadgrajuje. Če je bilo rečeno, da so nujni vsi podatki, ki jih je možno dobiti, da lahko celovito stvari analiziramo, potem je seveda pomembno, da je, kot je bilo rečeno, da so ta poročila v pomoč razvijalcem programa, ne da so same sebi nameni. In da tukaj bi morali bolj v tem smislu stvari premišljati in seveda v tem smislu tudi ravnati. In še zaključim s to mislijo, ki je tudi doktorica Bartol izpostavila, da so pomembni natančni podatki v celoti na trgu dela in seveda tudi v analizi priprava teh odločitev, upoštevanje tistih različnih dejavnikov, ki, kot kažejo, odločilno vplivajo na to, kako se študenti oziroma potem diplomantje tudi odzivajo, ne, posebej te dva, ki sta bila izpostavljena, vidik plače in pa zaposlenosti. Zdi se mi, da je ta današnjo srečanje v bistvu dalo kar precej elementov, kakovostnih elementov za to, da lahko tudi v naše delo v okviru nacionalne agencije in sistema, ki ga imamo, marsikaj še dogradimo in naprej uspešno razvijamo. Hvala vsem.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dular, for your closing thoughts. It was very comprehensive, and thank you for that. I agree. We got a lot of information, useful information. And as I said before, this is the beginning. These are the valuable insights to proceed with our work. In closing, I would like to sincerely thank all participants and panelists for their effort and valuable contributions to today's conference. Your insight, as I said, and discussion have been truly enriching. And for all participants, as a reminder, this event was recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel, and of course published on our website. The link to the YouTube channel, the easiest way to find it will be through our website. Additionally, we will be publishing both printed and digital version of the panelist contribution, which will be shared with you in the coming weeks or months. Thank you again for your engagement and looking forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you.